We know that many Canadian families were impacted with the loss of loved ones, and all Canadians who saw the devastation had their thoughts and prayers go out to those in that region. From as soon as the news came out, Canada has stood ready to act and support those impacted by this natural disaster.
This conference is being recorded.
Up to $50 million in humanitarian assistance support to the people of Syria and Turkey. That has included an immediate commitment of $10 million the day after the first earthquake to provide life-saving support like emergency medical services, food, and other essential items for those impacted. Canada has also matched donations to each of the Canadian Red Cross and the Humanitarian Coalition to deliver services on the ground. In direct response to an appeal from the United Nations for assistance, Canada provided an additional $20 million in ongoing support. Canada continues to partner with groups like the United Nations Refugee Agency and the International Organization on Migration to deliver support and assistance to refugees and displaced persons in the region. Finally, Canada has been mobilizing a cross-government coordinated response since day one. An interdepartmental task force was established to ensure our teams are coordinated and collaborating to deliver effective support. Canada has been and remains committed to helping all those impacted in the region. And that is why we're here today, to announce additional support to those who continue to be impacted by the devastating earthquake. I'm very happy to invite my colleague, Sean Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, to discuss what measures his department has already taken and what new measures are being implemented to provide added support. Minister Sean Fraser.
Hello, and thank you everyone for being here, and to my colleague Iqwinder Gaheer. It's a pleasure to be with you here. It's wonderful every time we can spend a little bit of time together, and thank you so much for hosting today's event. I also want to acknowledge my colleague, the Honourable Omar Alghabra, our Minister of Transport, as well as guests representing the Syrian Canadian Foundation. Marwa, thank you so much for being here. And the Federation of Canadian Turkish Associations. Sima, thank you so much for joining us for today's important announcement. Let me start by just addressing the challenging situation that we've seen on the ground. When we saw images of the earthquakes that took place in Turkey and Syria, the world watched with horror. There are no words that can adequately express the terror that we witnessed. To see families impacted, buildings turned into rubble, and for days afterward, to see the stories of heroes digging through the rubble to save their loved ones, to identify people that they've never met in hopes they could save lives in the days that followed the earthquakes was something that will stick with me for a very long time. To see the response of communities across Canada, not just Turkish and Syrian communities, but people from across the country to raise money to support people who've been impacted, was incredibly inspiring. Though I come from a small town in Nova Scotia where we may not have the largest Turkish population, I met a young international student who started a fundraising campaign because she wanted to help, and garnered a lot of attention from her fellow students at a university campus nearby that were raising thousands of dollars to help contribute to the effort. Of course, in recent years, even in rural Nova Scotia, we've seen an increasing number of Syrian refugees who've landed in our communities, who've educated many of us who have been in Canada from different parts of the world for many generations on the need to continue to be good humanitarians and to contribute to the response to help protect vulnerable people around the world. I want those of you who represent or come from Syrian and Turkish communities in Canada to know that we're going to continue to do what we can to be supportive, because it's the right thing to do. I'm happy to share today some of the next measures that we'll be introducing to help continue to support people who are impacted by the earthquake, and importantly, their families who are here in Canada. We have implemented new measures that are going to make it easier for people who've been impacted by the earthquakes to come to Canada. In particular, we are going to priority process applications for temporary residency from people who have been impacted, specifically including family members of people who are in Canada today. We're using new technologies within our system to ensure that more of these people will be approved to come to Canada, despite the fact that there are ordinarily barriers that prevent people from around the world from coming here successfully. In addition to making it easier for people to come and be reunited with their families in Canada, we're also introducing new measures for people who are already in Canada that will make it easier for them to stay. In particular, we're going to allow people who are here in Canada to apply for extensions, cost-free, to remain in this country. We're also going to create an opportunity for people who are here temporarily to apply for open work permits that could allow them to stay for up to 3 years. We're also making it easier for people to move between temporary streams. So if you're here temporarily as a visitor, a student, or a worker, you can more easily transition to one of the other temporary streams that make it easier to remain in Canada. For permanent residency applicants who are already in our system, we're going to waive the requirement that you have passports or travel documents, recognizing that many people lost access to the documents that they had as a result of the tragedy that unfolded during the earthquake. And for citizens and permanent residents of Canada who are in the region that's been affected, we'll also be waiving fees for passports and travel documents going forward. And of course, for applications that are already in the system, we're going to continue to prioritize the applications that are within IRCC to ensure people who have an application in the system will be treated on a priority basis and have their applications expedited. Just before I finish, c'est essentiel de continuer de soutenir des personnes qui ont un impact avec les tragédies. Nous demeurons déterminés à aider les personnes de la région à se rétablir et reconstruire leur vie, que ce soit par l'entremise de l'aide internationale et humanitaire ou en facilitant l'arrivée des personnes au Canada ou la prolongation de leur séjour ici en toute sécurité. It's essential that we continue to treat this as a priority. There are people around the world who have family members here in Canada who care deeply about them. I hope today's announcement will make it easier for those who've been impacted to come and receive temporary protection in Canada, and for those who are already here that are Turkish and Syrian nationals, knowing that they will be able to stay, will give them peace of mind that they don't need to return home to an uncertain future. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We look forward to continuing to offer our support for those communities who've been impacted. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Minister Fraser. We know that this announcement will definitely have an impact. And now I'd like to invite my neighbor, my friend, and the Minister of Transport, Omar Alghabra, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iqwinder. Friends, it's great to be with you this morning. Minister Fraser, welcome to Mississauga. It's great to have you here. You know, we often talk about Canada's diversity. The richness of Canada's diversity means every time any other part of the world feeling pain, we feel it here in Canada. And Canada has been a leader, a world leader, when it comes to humanitarian support and supporting each other. Canadians themselves have been always at the forefront of wanting to help the rest of the world, because it's either they themselves are from that part of the world, or their neighbor is, or their work colleague is, or their kid's teacher is. So we have this understanding and desire to support each other. But we also know this makes us a better country. This makes us a better nation. And just like we have done in the past with the port explosion in Beirut, with Ukraine, with Afghanistan, with Uyghurs, with the Rohingyas, and others, Canada has stepped up. And today's announcement, I know, offers some comfort to many Canadians who have been feeling the pain and anxiety where their family members have been impacted by the devastating earthquake. I also want to give a shout out to our colleague, Minister Sajan, for his work. We have so far dedicated a total of $100 million to the region, $50 million for the Turkey and Syria's earthquake devastation, and another 50 that was allocated prior to the earthquake in Syria, but then was reassigned to help those who've been impacted by earthquake. And that includes matching funds that are raised by community and charitable organizations, which leads me to say thank you to community members who have rallied, who have collected donations, who have advocated for their friends, for their family. Today, you're seeing the government in action, Minister Fraser, has been a minister who takes action. He's challenged with many challenges, but he's taking action, and I'm grateful for his leadership and his support. And I know, Minister Fraser, this announcement today will offer comfort to thousands of Canadians. So thank you for making this announcement here in Mississauga. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Minister, for your words. I'd like to now invite Marwa Khobieh, Syrian Canadian Foundation, to say a few words, please.
Thank you so much, Minister Alghabra, for your remarks and your continuous support to SCF and to our community. Welcome, everyone, to the Syrian Canadian Foundation office space. We're honored to have Minister Fraser's announcement take place here today. Just to tell you a bit about SCF and how our journey started. We started and we formed SCF back in 2015 and 2016 when the first wave of Syrian refugees arrived to Canada. As a group of Syrian Canadians, we decided to step in and support thousands of Syrian refugees who became part of our Canadian community. And since then, SCF has grew from a grassroots organization to a national and charitable organization that supports now a diverse background of refugees and newcomers. And we have, there's many lessons learned from the Syrian refugee crisis that we were able to extend our experience and knowledge and empower many different refugees to accelerate their ability to thrive within the Canadian community through our innovative and unique programs. On behalf of the Syrian Canadian community, we thank Minister Fraser and the Canadian government for the measures they have put in place to assist those impacted by the recent earthquake in Syria and Turkey. Over 12 years of conflict in Syria and now the devastating earthquakes, more than 12.1 million Syrians are tragically living below the poverty line. These numbers hit hard when I was making some research last night writing my speech. It will take substantial and sustained international support and commitment for years in recovery efforts to help the people in Syria and Turkey. We look forward to continue partnering and working with the Canadian government to ensure the impacted communities in Syria and Turkey can rebuild their lives and ease the hardship that they're going through, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sima, for your words. We know that the losses are devastating, and hopefully we can do everything, Marwa, for your words, and hopefully we can do everything possible to help the Syrian people. Now I'd like to invite Sima Acan, Federation of Canadian Turkish Associations, to come and say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Fraser, Honorable Alghabra, distinguished Member of Parliament, and esteemed guests. It's an immense honor to address you today as the President of the Federation of Canadian and Turkish Associations and express our profound gratitude to Minister Fraser and the Government of Canada for their support. The earthquake has caused big devastation and has left many families separated from their loved ones. The pain and suffering that these families are experiencing are unimaginable, and we cannot thank Minister Fraser enough for his invaluable assistance in providing relief to family reunion visas and visa applications for those impacted by the recent earthquake disaster in Turkey and Syria. The commendable initiative was initiated by a group of immigration consultants and lawyers, along with our community members and our community organizations, some of whom joined us here today. I extend my sincere appreciation to them for their dedication and support. As Turkish Canadians, with over 150,000 population across Canada, we know that the announced measures today will help our community unite their families, stay and heal together. That said, many members of our community still have family members who are looking for a place to call home. That is why, going forward, we look forward to collaborating with our government to address specific issues regarding speed of processing, reduction and flexibility of paperwork, as anyone can guess in this situation that sometimes it may be impossible, waiving processing fees for the applicants from Turkey or Syria, flexibility on eligibility requirements for temporary visa applications, and inclusion of siblings in family reunifications. Besides the stories coming from Turkey or Syria, we have heard heartbreaking stories here in Canada. There are many affected Turkish students and Syrian students in Canadian educational institutions. They are under financial and psychological burdens. It is imperative that our government extend equal consideration to international students. On behalf of the Turkish community, the Federation of Canadian Turkish Associations would like to express our sincere appreciation and gratitude to Minister Fraser, to all community members for their exceptional work in providing relief to family reunion visas and visa applications for those impacted. As the President of the Federation, I pledge to continue working closely with our government and the affected families and the students to help them to rebuild their lives. Minister Fraser, your leadership and dedication will significantly impact the lives of many, and we are truly grateful for all you have done and will be doing. Together we can make a difference. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sima. As with the Syrian people, our hearts and minds are with the Turkish people as well. That does conclude today's announcement. I'd like to welcome both ministers up to the podium for questions from the media.
Thank you very much, Iqwinder. Merci. My name is Andre Visser with IRCC Communications. We are going to start the question and answer period for media on the floor and on the phone. Please remember to identify yourself with your name and media organization before asking your question and follow-up. Bonjour, je m'appelle André Visser, représentant d'IRCC en communication. Nous allons commencer la période de questions-réponses avec les membres des médias ici sur le plancher et au téléphone. S'il vous plaît, vous identifiez avec votre nom et organisation médiatique avant de poser votre question et suivi. Merci. I think we have one second, okay? Just let me go right over here. I'm so sorry, you're right here. You asked me first, and then you're going to go next. So sorry.
Hey, good afternoon, Minister. My name is Marwa Khobieh. I'm with the Canadian Press. I want to ask you about your focus, the focus of your announcement today. There has been a lot of anticipation and frankly hope among Syrian and Turkish Canadians that the government will come forward with measures to make it a lot easier for those who want to bring their family members from the area that was impacted by the earthquake. But today's announcement is mainly focused on helping those who are already here. Why the government has taken this approach, and are you still considering, introducing more measures to help those who want to bring their family members to Canada?
First, thank you very much. And if I wasn't clear in my remarks, there's two key themes that I hope people take away from today's announcement. Certainly, there are measures to help those who are already here, but in addition, people who have been impacted will benefit from special treatment in their application to come to receive temporary protection in Canada, including the family members of people who are here. For those who apply for a temporary residency visa, we will be able to treat their TRV application with priority processing and special measures that we're implementing internal to our system to provide guidance to our officers to facilitate the approval of their cases so they can come to Canada and receive Canada's protection. What we've discovered in particular recently in response to the latest Russian invasion into Ukraine is that if we use our programs in an innovative way, we can offer temporary protection to large numbers of people who are in need of it much quicker than we could through ordinary refugee resettlement programs, for example. In addition to the measures that would have been included in some of the materials that were circulated for people who are already here, people should know that new applications to receive temporary protection through the TRV system will receive special treatment as a result of today's announcement, in addition to the measures that will support people who are already here.
Okay, so on this special treatment, I just need more clarity here.
Certainly.
So, for example, the visitor visa, one of the most important requirements that people who want to apply under this program, that they have to establish that they have enough financial means to support themselves there while they're in Canada. Another requirement, for example, is that they have to establish that they will go back to their home country after their visa expires. Are you going to relax or waive any of these requirements as you did for Ukrainians last year?
We're using a new strategy to help facilitate the arrival of people who find themselves in those situations who ordinarily may not be approved to come to Canada. The specific mechanism that we're using involves the use of advanced analytics within IRCC's system to identify people who have been impacted by the earthquake and to render a positive eligibility decision for a bulk group of applicants at once to allow them to be approved to come to Canada on the basis that they have been impacted by the earthquake and are seeking to come through the TRV system. I have high hopes that we will see a very high approval rate, notwithstanding the ordinary obstacles that may exist, and I will undertake to work closely with the communities represented in Canada by the associations who spoke today to ensure that the implementation goes smoothly. My expectation is that we're going to see a significant improvement compared to what the ordinary approval rate would be as a result of using positive decisions through a bulk eligibility strategy.
Thank you, Minister. We have a question over here.
Thank you, Minister Fraser. It's İrep Çakır with Turkish Voice of Canada. So currently there are two petitions at the House of Commons, both endorsed by Liberal MPs, by the way. So, and there are very specific demands on those petitions. Is your ministry going to address those specific demands, like one of them being family reunification to be extended to siblings? Those kind of specific demands. Are you going to take into consideration those specific demands? What will be the next steps for those? And yeah, first.
My hope is today's announcement will actually go further than including the specific reference to siblings. With respect to the TRV treatment that we're moving forward with, siblings, for example, and a broader range of families could be impacted, as well as people from the region who do not fall into a specific narrow definition of family that's used for our permanent residency programs. The measures that we've announced today will apply to a much broader group of people beyond the ordinary definition of family, but certainly including siblings.
So is there any door open, any room actually for people who are going to make their first applications?
Yes, certainly. First-time applicants will be treated equally through this process that seek to come to Canada as a result of the changes to the way that we're going to be processing TRVs for this purpose of humanitarian protection, and we will be giving specific guidance to IRCC's officer to try to facilitate their arrival for the purpose of receiving Canada's protection.
But there will be a special code for it or not?
So a special...
Special code for it, like for the first application, are they going to use a special, reference for their application?
We're going to be able to identify the applicants on the basis of the information that they provide through their ordinary application, but we're going to be using the advanced analytics tools that we've developed in recent years at IRCC to essentially identify a cohort of applicants who meet the definition for this particular treatment that we're providing to facilitate the people's arrival in Canada for the purpose of receiving humanitarian protection as a result of the earthquakes that took place.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. We're going to go right over here.
Hi, Mr. It's Phil Pan, Global News. We're speaking with a Calgarian who's having issues getting his family member who's in hospital in Turkey to come to Canada. Are there any provisions or considerations in this program for people who are in hospital or otherwise need medical care?
I want to be careful not to speak to individual case files that I'm not personally familiar with, and of course it engages certain privacy obligations. My hope and expectation with the changes that we are announcing today to the way that we're going to be processing temporary residency visas for the purpose of providing humanitarian protection is that regardless of whether someone has particular health concerns, they will have expedited consideration of their application with a much, much higher approval rate than would ordinarily be the case. There are, of course, parallel tracks that a person could apply to if they were in need of humanitarian protection through, for example, an ordinary refugee program on the basis of certain other conditions. And by the way, we will also be expediting existing refugee applications in the system. But my hope is the tool would apply to someone who has particular health concerns, but it should allow us to address a significantly larger number of applications than would ordinarily be the case in a much shorter period of time, regardless of whether that person is suffering from unique health needs but by treating people in a bulk way, we'll be able to deal with significantly larger volumes of applications that don't necessarily demand that kind of exigency to the circumstances, but would also include a person who faces those unique and challenging circumstances.
Thank you, Minister. We have another question right over here.
Hi, Minister. This is Fakhruddin from Omni News. So my question is, how do you see these new measures impacting Canada's relationship with Turkey and Syria? And my second question is, how will the Canadian government, manage any potential concerns or challenges that may arise as a result of these new measures? Thank you.
So first of all, on the relationship with different countries in the world, it's always important that we do what we can to foster positive relationships where possible. But this was driven not by a desire to necessarily improve bilateral relations, although I don't doubt that people and governments that see individuals struggling around the world are happy when they see other countries step up to provide assistance. But this was driven by the need to protect vulnerable people, in particular to support the families of people who are vulnerable by giving a pathway for them to be reunited, at least on a temporary basis. The second portion of your question was really on federal and provincial relations. Anytime we deal with an influx of people who are in vulnerable circumstances, we try to make sure that we work closely with provincial governments, because when you have an influx of people who land in a particular community, there's different people who will sometimes be in need of different kinds of services. We have conversations with settlement organizations, with provincial and territorial governments. Of course, when we're using a TRV model, it engages a whole host of conversations about whether people will end up staying here longer than the initial period of protection is intended for, which will potentially down the line involve conversations about impacts on healthcare and education. But I think for today, the urgency is behind getting people to safety and having them be reunited with their loved ones in Canada. But those conversations will continue with our provincial counterparts after we see people starting to arrive in our communities.
Thank you, Minister. We don't have any calls on the out-of-town government teleconference line, but we do have one last question.
Sure.
I'll pass it back.
Yeah. Hi, Minister Mann with the Canadian Press again. Just to follow up on your answer regarding the requirements to apply for visa. One of the requirements that I have been personally hearing a lot about from people who are trying to bring their family members is the issue of biometrics for those who want to apply for any kind of visa from inside Syria, basically, because we don't have a Canadian embassy in Syria.
Of course.
So what have you been considering this? Have you been thinking about this? What is do you have any innovative kind of way to find a solution to this issue?
Thank you for this question, and we had a brief conversation with representatives from the associations who both spoke today just immediately before we came to the microphone. If I can be completely candid with you, I expect this will be the biggest logistical challenge for people who seek to avail themselves of this new opportunity to come to Canada. Thankfully, it's not the first time that we've run into this sort of a situation. When we deal with emergency situations around the world, we often don't have the ability to have a presence on the ground, whether it's a result of wars, whether it's a result of a lack of bilateral relations with a host country in certain challenging circumstances, or whether it's a result of natural disasters. We do have the capacity to use mobile biometric kits that we can move to different parts of the world. Depending on specifically where they're located in the world at any given point in time, it can be difficult to move them on a moment's notice. But we watch the flows of migration to identify when we're responding to emergency situations, whether and where we must set up these mobile biometrics units. Regardless of where we're able to station these particular units, it's still going to be a challenge for people to get outside of their country. Syria is a particularly good example because I don't anticipate we'll be able to set up biometrics kits inside the country. So people will be required to make their way to a place where we're able to offer those biometrics appointments, but to the extent that we can be flexible and move some of the mobile biometric kits that we have available, it's something we're willing to consider, but we need to understand where the flows of people will lead to before we can identify the best place to station those mobile units in order to serve people, but we'll continue to watch what happens on the ground to make those decisions in the days and weeks ahead.
Thank you very much, ministers. That concludes our press conference today. I really appreciate your time. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.